Hey Wargamers, welcome back to the channel Death from Above Wargaming. I'm Aaron, coming back with some more Battlytics excitement. So, if you've been paying attention, you might know that we have a Battlytics tournament on Patreon for our veteran patrons. This is really exciting. It's a single elimination bracket tournament. Each Lance Commander gets to submit a Lance of their own design up to 150 points. The only real restriction being that it does need to be in that late Succession Wars era before Lost Tech. So we've had 24 different entries. So basically I set it up in a seeded bracket. So I had all 24 teams face off against a Lance of my design that met the criteria, and then I ranked them based on efficiency in that battle. So really cool. What I'm going to show you tonight is one of the first round battles. So in the first round we had 16 teams competing to advance to the next round. There were a couple that were extremely close. They were really cool matchups. So wanted to bring those to you. So this first one tonight is a team by the name of the Crimson Stalkers against the Kanagawa Crushers. So this is a real good one. Guys, stick around. Alpha Strike Battlytics coming right up. All right, guys, here we are. So as we get started here, I do want to say a couple of things. One, I've got some exciting new layout changes to this sort of presentation. Got some feedback from a lot of people on the previous one we did against the Command Lance and the Battle Lance. So thank you everybody for the most excellent comments, and also thanks to our patrons for all your help as well. So a little bit different flow here. Generally the same underlying engine. I did add a couple of things to capture some more data. To have a couple of different things to talk about, some new things. But let's talk about first the Lance comp. So on the Crimson Stalkers side, again, 150 point cap. These guys came in at 146 points. 4 mechs, a Zeus 6S. This was in a Vanguard role and veteran skill level. So Vanguard is basically your meat shield. This thing is going to push up the center. It's going to try to engage as quickly as possible and draw as much attention to itself as you can. The Zeus is well suited to that role. It's got good armor, good structure, pretty tough mech overall. Second, we have the almighty Grasshopper. Love this mech. Well priced, lots of armor, lots of structure. It does lack in the long range firepower department, but certainly makes up for it at medium and short, and also has those jump jets that help out. The Wolverine 6K, a favorite of mine. It is a little bit costly for a 55 tonner, but does have that nice TMM of 2. And again, 11 total pips of armor and structure, so really tough there. And then lastly, the JR7F. Love this mech in Classic. In Alpha Strike, it's a little bit overcosted, and that's because it does have that TMM of 3. It's very beneficial, but I do feel like the price, and you see this a lot on the clan side, that price tends to ratchet up as you increase that TMM. So this one is situated in a pursuit role, so that means it's going to deploy in the center, and it's really gravitating, as fast as it can straight up the gut, looking for targets. The Wolverine and the Grasshopper both deployed in a strike role by this Lance Commander, so they'll be likely deploying on either of the flanks and then closing in from there. So the key force metrics, that green line on the right there, what we're looking at, those 5 icons: pilot skill, weighted weapon damage, armor, structure, and then speed. So pilot skill here is a little bit high, so close to the 4 side. So you can see there are 3 regular pilots, skill 4 pilots in this Lance, and that's basically in exchange for fitting some more expensive in terms of PV mechs. The overall damage, so this is a weighted damage calculation based on the total Lance's firepower at short, medium, long, and extreme range, factors in overheat, something that the Battlytics engine calculates. This came in just above 2.0, which is not great. It's not terrible. Most Lances are going to be around 3 at this point value in this era. But armor, very strong at about a 6. Structure, also very strong at about a 5. And then speed, looking real good there at a 5.0. So overall, you got a tough, fast lance. It doesn't put out a lot of firepower. Again, it does lack in that long-range department. But let's see how it does. So moving on to the Kanagawa Crushers. These guys are Draconis Combine aligned, if you didn't pick that up by the name. So some four really good mechs here. You've got a Black Knight BL7. This thing has an overheat value of 2, and it's definitely tough, just like that Zeus. So also deployed in a Vanguard role. It will be interesting to see how these two mechs do. And yet another Grasshopper. Again, can't say enough about this thing. Good armor. Well costed. The only difference here is this Grasshopper deployed in a pursuit role and also a skill 3 veteran. Catapult K2, another great one. I field this one all the time. A great direct fire mech. Good at medium range, good at long range, has a little bit at extreme. It does have more armor than the C1 Catapult by 1 pip, which, you know, difference between life and death here in this game. And then lastly, the Mongoose, Mon 67. So this was the only lance to field a Mongoose. Really cool. And also, if you guys have not seen the new Kickstarter design for the Mongoose, it's so cool. Just light years ahead of what it was, and absolutely can't wait to get it painted on the table. This one, skill 3 in a strike roll. This is a tough little mech. I feel like, again, with that TMM3, it's very pricey like the Jenner. It doesn't have as much armor as the Jenner, doesn't jump like the Jenner, but it is, you know, from a raw movement perspective, it is faster. So interesting to see how those two mechs sort of match up. So these lances, very similar in design, but very different in output. Key force markers tell us, you know, much better skill in this lance. The average, the weighted damage, much higher, again, close to that 3 mark. Armor, just under 6. Structure right around 5, which is similar, and then speed also similar, right around 5. So excited to dive into these two amazing lances. All right, guys, so we're going to start with the Free Worlds League aligned Crimson Stalkers. First thing, top right, we've got rated versus actual damage by percent. So what I look at here is all of the damage that the lance can put out at each range bracket, short, medium, long, extreme. The transparent bar on the left of each series, of each group, is the rated damage. So that's what you would expect it to deliver. The solid bar is what it actually did. So what we can see here, again, very weak at long and extreme range. In fact, the output actual is less than the rated. At medium range, that's where this lance really comes into its own. It hangs out at medium range. It's really doing a lot of damage at medium range. It's exceeding its output. And then short, it's about, you know, within 5 or 10 percentage points, so pretty close there. Jumping down to the battle metrics here, so what we see is the familiar area chart from the last one. The gold represents the damage. The red represents how much the lance has soaked or the damage taken. So just looking at the pie chart, you can tell this lance took more damage than it dealt, which, you know, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to lose because, again, different armor, different toughness overall. But what you can see here is that it starts to eclipse a little bit right around turn 5. You can see the damage output starting to exceed how much damage it's taken, and then they stay pretty much in lockstep all the way down. So it really is only in those early turns, like turn 2, turn 3, turn 4, where you can see that darker red area, which means the gold has sort of dipped underneath of it, and that's really because it doesn't have the long-range damage output, and the other lance obviously does, and we'll look at that one in a minute. Overall survivability, so again, this is the percent of, you know, just a blended average across all 4 mechs at turn 10. What did they survive or not, right? And you've got 31.2%. And if you look at the chart there, we'll dive into each individual mech, but each of those 4 lines represents a mech. So 2 of them doing very well, and I'll let you guess at what those are until we get there. 2 of them not doing so well. In the center here, we have a breakdown of sample movement. So I grabbed one of the simulations and plotted that out just to see what the mechs were doing, how they were behaving. So again, you can see that Grasshopper and that Wolverine all the way in the bottom, deploying way out on the flank. The Zeus, the Jenner, deploying more centrally, making their way in. The Zeus playing it a little bit more conservative in that Vanguard role. The Jenner just, pedal to the metal, getting in as quickly as it can. So overall efficiency, what we have broken down here on the right is very simply, what's the average lance efficiency, right? And it was 95.6 across all the mechs. And which ones were performing and which ones were not. So the Zeus slightly underperforming, the Jenner grossly underperforming, but the Grasshopper and the Wolverine doing very well. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump into each mech in this lance. We're going to take a look at a couple of the key statistics, and then we'll get into the Kanagawa Crushers. So starting with this Zeus here, let's talk about the battle metrics for a minute. This mech did 11.5% of the total damage, and took about 18% of the total damage. Early on in the game, this mech is actually delivering some heat at long range, turns 1, 2, 3. Looks like it gets primed typically in the middle of the game. Now remember, these battle metrics are a blend of 2,500 simulations, 2,500 games of Alpha Strike. So this isn't just looking at one game. So this is very common for this thing to get primed up. It is a big mech. It's in the middle of the field. It's surrounded by a lot of bad guys, so it is going to get taken down fairly quickly. Only survived 6.8% of the games all the way to turn 10, and largely, if you look at the survivability curve, the one highlighted in green is the Zeus. Right around turn 5, turn 6, that's where you see it start to tank. But it's doing its job. It's soaking fire to let that Wolverine and Grasshopper largely get in undamaged so they can bring their payloads to bear. And when you're looking at a Wolverine and a Grasshopper that can do a combined 7 points of damage at medium range, that's a good thing. So I'd say job well done here on the part of the Zeus. And it comes out at the end with an efficiency score of 80.6%. Just below that, those two bars, that's a new visualization. And really what that represents, guys, is a comparison of the percent of PV for the Lance that this Zeus cost, and the percent of PV over the whole battlefield that this Zeus cost. So it was 26.6% of the Lance, 14.2% in the overall battlefield. So again, it did 11.5%, took 18.5%, cost 14.2%. Not bad. All right, so the Grasshopper. Let's speed through this one. You can see this thing doesn't do anything early in the game. Mid-game, it just opens up, doing consistent damage every turn. It starts to take damage late game, but it survives 56.5% of the time. Most games you're not even really seeing critical hits, only taking 1.6 criticals per average in a game, and that's probably where it does get taken down, because remember, it's got 6 points of internal structure. It's going to be hit multiple times, probably 2, 3, maybe even 4 times. So you're going to have a lot of crit chances on this thing. So only taking 1.6 is pretty good. It outperformed in terms of damage. It did 16.5%. It only cost 12.5%. So that efficiency score very well. Good return on investment here. 131.2% on the efficiency score. So very good on the Grasshopper. Wolverine, similar story. So the Grasshopper and the Wolverine, almost in every simulation, chose to deploy on the same side of the battlefield. They chose the same targets. They worked as a tandem, and it really paid off. You can see this Wolverine, a less of a threat than the Grasshopper, and because of that, it very rarely took damage. It takes just a little bit of damage, about a point of damage every turn from turn 4 onward. Survived 61.1% of the games. Very few critical hits. Did a ton of damage, almost twice as much damage as it took. So again, job well done here for this Wolverine. And the efficiency score came in very high, 140.2%. Jenner, on the other hand, not so hot. Only delivered 3.3% of the overall battlefield damage, which is abysmal. If you think about it, there's 8 mechs on the field. Everything should be doing on average 12.5%. Doesn't ever quite work out that way, but 3.3, well below the average. It does get absolutely lit up early in the game. It is the first thing to go down almost every time. It's sprinting to get in because it is in that pursuit role. Only survives 0.3% of the games. I don't know what to tell you. By turn 3, if you look at the armor analysis, by turn 3, that crosshairs represents where you cross the threshold from armor to structure. So by turn 3, 4, it's already taken crits. It's pretty much a goner. And it starts out good. If you look at the efficiency analysis, you know, by turn 2, right, it's ins. In some turns, it's actually doing damage. Turn 3, it's doing well, and then it just tanks. It just drops off all the way to about 30.5%. Because when you die early, and again, you know, jumping back to the survivability curve, it's largely dead by turn 5. You're spending, you know, 32 PV for a mech that's only alive for half the game, you know, at best. So it's tough. You know, what would I do different here, guys? I probably wouldn't have deployed this mech in a pursuit role. I think skill 4 was the right thing for this mech, but I probably would have put it out on the flank in a strike role. Maybe move that Grasshopper more centrally into a Vanguard role along with that Zeus. It's tough to say because the Grasshopper and the Wolverine did so well on the outside. But why don't we move on to the Kanagawa Crushers? We'll take a look at their team statistics. We'll take a look at each of the mechs, and then we'll get into the final analysis. Okay, so Kanagawa Crushers, love the name. Fighting for the Draconis Combine, for the Dragon, dare I say. So you can see the rated damage here, much higher at long and extreme range. They didn't do a whole lot at extreme. I mean, you really don't, because the modifier's highest, you know, and it's such just a small window of the game that you're in extreme range. Decent damage dealt at long range, about 10% of the overall output, but medium range, this lance really shined, you know, over 60% there. And then short range, you've got about 30% output there, so not bad. Battle metrics. So you can see they exceeded the Crimson Stalkers very early in the game. They got some early damage on those mechs. I want to say that was probably all taken by the poor Jenner. You know, and then late in the game, it pretty much it evens out, right? The Stalkers kind of pull ahead in turn 5, and then they kind of come back at turn 6, but it's largely the same all the way through. The one thing that really jumps out at me here is that the Crushers, if you think back to the heat buildup of the Stalkers, the Crushers are building up way more heat, and that's because they have mechs that largely can build up heat, like that Black Knight, you know, can build up too, and we'll dive into that in just a moment. Some other things here I want to go over: survivability very close, 33.5% on the Kanagawa Crushers. I believe it was in the 31.2 range for the Stalkers. So let's look at the movement profile here. Let's talk about what these guys were doing. So the Mongoose deployed a little bit on the outside, the Catapult in a direct fire role, the Grasshopper and the Black Knight both centrally deployed, Grasshopper in a pursuit role, Black Knight in a Vanguard role. So how did this work out? Well, what I can see here is the Mongoose, you know, is charging in. It makes it a lot further, it appears, than the Jenner did. Catapult looks like it kind of moves in, then sort of dances around the middle there. Grasshopper just goes straight in. Black Knight takes a pretty interesting path here. Looks like it breaks off a little bit to that left flank, really, to kind of pick out some of those outlying mechs like the Wolverine and the Grasshopper. Not sure that ended well for the Black Knight, but, you know, it did stall them for a little bit at least. Maybe that pays dividends. We'll see. Efficiency analysis here, Black Knight doing well. It is under that average of 100%, and it's under the target that really you want mechs at 100%, right? Or more, 100% minimum. That means you're getting, you know, an even return on investment. Black Knight is in the 90s, I believe, just judging by this. Actually, it's 88%, so it's not bad. I wouldn't say that underperformed. Grasshopper and Catapult did very well. Mongoose, not great, but better than a Jenner. So let's see each individual mech and how that played out. Okay, so this Black Knight, excited to see how this guy did. I love Overheat 2 mechs or Overheat 3 mechs because when you gamble that shot and you hit with it, it's devastating. And this thing, again, can do 5 points with the Overheat. You know, I love that Rifleman 4D, as you guys know. Same deal, Overheat 2. It just makes the mech this sort of like, they forget, your opponent sometimes forgets about it, right? You're doing 3 points, and you're like, boom, 5. So anyway, I digress. Battle metrics. So this thing, So this chart was rescaled. If you notice, the the y-axis goes all the way up to 6. Most of them go up to 3. This thing gets absolutely obliterated around turn 5, turn 6, and that's about when it comes into contact, with that Grasshopper and the Wolverine in the one analysis that we picked out in the center. I wonder if that was pretty typical, where the Black Knight was picking up some of the bigger meteor targets to draw them away. The heat you can see as this thing starts to die, as the survivability curve drops after turn 5, it makes very intelligent decisions about overheating. When these mechs know that they're on their way out, or if you win initiative, right, and you die, right, because your opponent shoots first if you win initiative, and the Black Knight dies, it's overheating maximum every time, doesn't care. So you can see that heat build up, and I mean it's building up on average. Yeah, it's quite a bit of heat here. What do we got? Like just about 1.5 points of heat. If I look at the exact numbers there all the way through turn 10. So basically at maximum, and that's the heat that it's carrying turn over turn. So survived only 3.2% of the time. It's not fantastic, but it still managed to dish out 12.2%. So remember I said about 12.5% average if you slice this pizza in 8 slices. So 12.2, considering it only survives 3.2% of the time, I'll take that. That's pretty good. And if you could keep this thing alive just a little bit longer, I mean, it really probably could do some serious hurt there. But it absorbs 19.3% of the overall incoming damage. I think that might be the highest that we've seen so far, which is, I mean, that's a mech doing its job, especially when you want it in that Vanguard role. Things are going to die in this game. You can't expect that everything's going to survive. So if you have a mech that's taken it and able to dish it out, that's a great thing. And overall, this mech only cost, was it 13.8, 13.9% of the total PV pool. So ultimately, not a bad deal. So 87.8% precisely on that efficiency analysis. And I think the trend line here, or not the trend line, but the actual plot is important to look at. You can see it does well early in the game. It starts to deliver probably some long-range damage there. It dips a little bit, but then it starts to come back. As soon as you get into turn 6, right, that's where that overheat starts to come into play. You can see it start to uptick, and then the survivability dip kicks in, and that's why you see that in that purple line trending south through turn 10. But such is life when you're in a Vanguard role. No one said it was easy. Grasshopper. So, evil twin, as I like to call it, because I mean they're Draconis Combine. Obviously, they're evil. I just offended so many people, I know. So anyway, so the damage, this thing, 21.3%. This one just absolutely crushed it. If I jump back to the other Grasshopper, that was at 16.5%, but that Grasshopper only took about 12%, this Grasshopper taking 15.1%. So this Grasshopper dealing more, taking more. Again, it is in a pursuit role, and don't forget, guys, it's skill 3 that plays into this, but this Grasshopper did very well. Surviving 41.0, just 41 even % of the time. And overall it does, I think, very well for what you get. And that is why the efficiency score is so high on this thing. I think, was this higher than the, I think this is the highest one in the battle. We'll check that out at the end. But 14.9% is what this thing cost out of the overall PV pool. And again, doing 21.3%, you really can't ask for more than that. This thing's getting in, it's playing hard, it's dealing damage, criticals, it's dealing 3.1 criticals, it's taking 2.1 crits. It's there. I mean, it's all over. An average range is 6 inches. So remember, we're in a 1-to-1 scale, so short range is 3 inches here. So it's staying at medium range. That's exactly where it wants to be to use that maximum 4 points of damage. Nothing bad to say about this Grasshopper in this deployment. Catapult, equally impressive. I love everything I see here. So much gold on the chart, so little red, and you can see the red just kind of ramps up at the end. That's like the oh crap moment where the Op4 forgets that they have a catapult on the table just sitting there raining damage in on them, and it looks like this thing really starts delivering from turn 2 all the way through turn 10, and it's a very, very meaty damage curve, dealing 9.1 points, and again, only taking 3.3, so that's really good. It does 14.2% of the overall damage, and it only costs 10.7 what is that, 10.8%, 10.6%. So 130.8% on the overall efficiency. So we're looking, it's basically, you know, we're looking at what did you deal and what does it cost. We put those things together because survivability is automatically baked into your damage dealt. If you're dead, you don't deal any damage, right? And this thing survived 89.5% of the time. On average, this thing didn't take any critical hits. Like most games, this thing, you're barely getting through its armor. It only took a half a critical hit on average. Again, over 2,500 simulations, you know, in 10 turns. Like, that's impressive. So, congrats to the Lance Commander on this one. Perfect mech, perfect deployment, perfect, like, sort of behavior pattern in conjunction with the other mechs in this Lance. You know, they're looking at the Mongoose, it's looking at the Grasshopper, trying to worry about that Black Knight. You just got this Catapult, a skill 3, or skill 4 rather, Catapult, just running around, just nuking things. So very, very well done here. Now let's take a look at that Mongoose, speaking of which. Did a little better than the Jenner, but again, these mechs, you know, I said it in the prior Battlytics review, when you have a Lance with large disparity between the biggest mech and the smallest mechs just have a really difficult time competing. The Mongoose with a total of 5 little circles of armor, even with a TMM3, it doesn't have long range. It's got to get it medium range. It's got to get it short range. That makes the mech very hittable. So, you know, it's tough. It's tough for these little guys to compete in an arena where you've got Black Knights and Marauders and Grasshoppers and Awesomes. I mean, you know, somebody looks at them funny and they just disintegrate. But how did the Mongoose do? Well, it actually absorbed 8.4% of the total damage thrown out on this battle grid. And not bad. You know, it still spikes up pretty quick, takes a little bit of turn 2, lasts till turn 5 or 6, but was dead 100% of the time. At the end of every game in 2,500 games, this thing was gone. Jenner at least had 0.3% chance of survival. But, you know, overall, I don't know what to say. I mean, did it do its job? Maybe, maybe not. The efficiency analysis says it's at a 40.6%. So, you know, it is what it is. Now, of course, guys, I'm not saying the Mongoose is a bad mech, and I'm not necessarily saying that it wouldn't be effective in a specific mission. Like, if you're playing, like, one of the DFA missions, like Intercept or something like that, you want a smaller, faster mech, you know, that can either cap in the backfield or, you know, outflank and things like that. And that's not really, not yet at least, but that's not really factored in here. You know, maybe maybe one day I'll program in objectives and things like that just to see. But when you're looking at a straight up slugfest, and frankly, most of the Catalyst missions are straight up slugfest, this is not a mech that's going to survive in this type of Lance. You know, really, you know, it might be better suited, if anything, if you're going to play it, not in a strike role, but in like a second line role. Hold it back, wait, and then try to get it in after other bigger, nastier targets are identified. So, you know, it is what it is. But guys, let's take a look at the final conclusions here, the final comparison. Here it comes. All right, here we are, the final comparison between the Crimson Stalkers and the Kanagawa Crushers. Who won? Who will advance to round 2 of our Battlytics tournament? So let's take a look at a couple things here. Just a refresher, key force markers. The Stalkers are the lighter green line, the Crushers the darker green line. So the Crushers, better pilots, doing a little bit more damage. The Stalkers, better armor, better structure, speed roughly about the same on average across this Lance. Some Battlytics stats on the left there. So average range is basically individual mech to target, and then it's averaged over the course of the 10 turns for each Lance. So they're not going to be corollaries of each other. They're going to be completely different. The Stalkers at 5.5, the Crushers at 6.2. In terms of damage dealt, the Crushers winning that one out, 33.4, and the Stalkers only dealing 30.7. And remember, damage taken would just be the corollary of that. In terms of critical hits, the Crushers doing better there as expected. They're dealing more damage, or delivering more pips. More likely you're going to get those 12s. More likely you're going to get internal structure. Hit percentage is interesting. So this is a new stat that I added in to track in the engine. It actually tracks it at the individual mech level, but I did want to look at that at only the lance level. I think that's what's really important here. And so each lance is at 55%. So, and all the other simulations in this that I ran for this bracket tournament so far, they weren't the same. But these were dead even at 55%. So not bad. I've seen some that are higher in the 60s. Nothing really gets much higher than that. You know, for 150 points, maybe if you have some really good pilots or some mechs with substantial long-range firepower where they've got more chances to hit at range. But anyway, the last one important, total kills. So the Stalkers at 2.6, the Crushers at 2.8. So this is the number of kills that they get on average in a 10-turn game. Very close. So you might be wondering, well, there's 4 mechs in the field on each team. You know, neither one is killing every mech on average. How do you calculate a winner and a loser? Well, the engine looks at what you have left on the table, and it basically extrapolates from there. So if I've got an awesome with 3 weapon hits and it can't do any damage, and it's limping around, it's only got a couple pips of structure left, and you've got a totally fresh, you know, trebuchet on the table, you know, it's going to know that the trebuchet is worth more than the awesome at that point in time. So it does this calculation. It determines basically what you have left, you know, what kind of criticals they've taken, you know, how much armor and structure they have left and all of these things, and it determines a winner based on that. These 2 lances, they faced off in 2,500 games of Alpha Strike and split it perfectly down the middle. Each lance took 1,250 games as wins, and they lost the other 50%. It was crazy. So far, no other team, no other matchup has done that. So this was really cool to see. So how do I determine the tiebreaker? Well, I run one more game, one more sim, winner takes all. So it was high stakes. Who do you think won, guys? Well, let's take a look at some of the metrics here. This is all stuff we've looked at already, just kind of a refresher. So side by side, you know, those key battle metrics that we looked at, the damage and the soak. Again, the Crushers dealing a little bit more damage, also building up a lot more heat. You know, not much to say there. That Archer, that Grasshopper dealing 21.3%. I don't know where Archer came from. I've been doing too many of these. The 21.3% on that Grasshopper, just absolutely just crushing. And then on the Stalker side, the Grasshopper and the Wolverine both doing very well at 16.5 roughly percent for each of those mechs. And then the Catapult at 14.2%. So those were really the standout performers in terms of damage. And, you know, if we look at efficiency, the Zeus, the Black Knight, just under par there. Both did really well. Both served their role. 6 pips of armor, 6 pips of structure. They went up the gut. They took it like a champ. They delivered some damage. They were able to get their buddies in the fight. That's where the Grasshopper, the Wolverine, and then the Grasshopper and the Catapult on the other side were able to really, really rack up some kills. The Jenner and the Mongoose, you know, they get a participation trophy. They did, you know, for what you got, they did well. And then in the survivability side, the Kanagawa Crushers in dark, the darker sort of gray, and the Stalkers in the lighter white there. The survivability curves are almost identical. The total net survivability just different by about 2%, with the Crushers winning there. So when it's this close, guys, and you run one simulation, it is anybody's game. It's just like, you know, when you roll up with your buddy and you're both good players and you have equal forces and they're similarly designed just like these are, it could be anybody's game. So when I ran the simulation, the Kanagawa Crushers pulled out the win. So congratulations to the Lance Commander of the Kanagawa Crushers. You are advancing to round 2. Crimson Stalkers, awesome job. Just a phenomenal lance. I really like the lance design. It's definitely one that I would play. Again, you know, that Jenner, a little bit tough there. Didn't do so great. Maybe hold that guy back or swap it out with a different mech. There's a lot you can get for 32 points. There are Wolverine variants you can get for 32 points. So maybe something like that would have been better suited in a lance like this. And you could still run it in that pursuit roll and run it up the gut, but it might survive a little bit longer. And then same thing on the Kanagawa side. I mean, obviously these lances are locked in, so not much we can change at this point going into round 2. But that Mongoose definitely a sore point, and they're very costly. You know, like that General the Mongoose in the 30s. That's a lot. That's a lot you're shelling out there for those mechs. But overall, 2 very, very well designed lances. Was really excited to see this one. So guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this one. A couple of reminders. Reminder, the first, guys, if you have not subscribed, please do so. Just click the little button. It doesn't cost a thing. You can click the little bell. I had somebody on Discord ask me if, hey, did you post a video? And I was like, bro, I just posted one. So if you click that bell, YouTube will remind you. They will tell you when we post a video. Typically you can count on us to get one out just about every week. And sometimes we'll get a couple extra out, more than one a week if we can. Also, guys, if you want to support the channel more, or if you want to get in on the next Battlytics tournament, we're definitely going to have another one, head on over to Patreon, right? It's $1 at a minimum to help us out. That gets you access to things like sneak peeks. You can get in the conversation. You can vote on polls. We had one poll where the patrons got to pick Tom's list for a certain battle report. You get to see some pictures and things that we're working on that we've got on the workbench, so really cool there. There's a $5 tier that gets you access to all of our digital downloads, card generators, and catalogs for your Alpha Strike collection, converters from Classic to Alpha Strike, so some really neat stuff there. And then, of course, there's a $10 tier. That's the veteran tier. It's still not that much, and that gets you access to the veteran challenges where you can win amazing prizes. So the winner of this bracket tournament, of this particular veteran challenge, gets a lance, and I've showed these in some of the other videos. They were painted up by Colonel Matthew Steiner. Guys, he's just an amazing artist. If you don't follow him on Instagram, you definitely should. I mean, his stuff is out of this world. He also does some stuff on Twitch, so you can keep an eye out for that on Instagram. I think he typically posts up when he's going to be going live. So some really cool stuff there, and the winner gets 4 mechs from the game of Armored Combat, painted up by Matthew Steiner. We have 2 different lances, so very cool. Anyway, done advertising. Guys, thank you again for watching. Really appreciate it. And of course, you know the drill. Stay tuned. Always great stuff coming from Death from Above Wargaming. Have a good night.